Here's a rundown of the key points from Quiz 7. So, the first question about upper class women and birth rates. The main factor here is arranged marriage, which is why we're talking about upper class women in particular. Arranged marriage means that you end up being married to somebody that you might not be compatible with, not just romantically, but physically. This involves marriage between, old men and young women, or sometimes vice versa. Marriage that is not the choice of the people involved. And so, as a result, birth rates are lower, partly because people are less likely to have sex under those situations, and in some cases are too young to be having productive sex, and partly because arranged marriage under these circumstances leads to adultery and mistresses where the sex is being taken elsewhere. Alongside this, we have a demand for contraception in a way that is more advanced amongst the Romans, partly because this adultery is so prevalent, but contraception is commonplace amongst the female nobility, and so this also lowers birth rates. In addition, there is the outcome of death in childbirth. That is a side effect of the state of medicine at the time, but again, B, sometimes the women being younger and not stronger than in other situations. Other things that are mentioned, like infanticide, are much less prevalent. The main problem here is arranged marriage. And so, again, it's very important to keep in mind that conditions like this, the conditions for gender in general, always must bear in mind class. Whenever you're talking about gender, you must remember that you are talking about gender expectations and conditions amongst women of a particular class and amongst men of a particular class. And so this low birth rate thing is a product of the social conditions that is experienced by women amongst the elite families of the Romans, and things are considerably different for the middle and lower classes. Marriage with manus. So the main idea here, manus means hand. It means command of or ownership of. Manus refers to essentially a transaction in which and is used for other kinds of commercial transactions. Manus refers to the transfer of the responsibility of of representing a woman to the public space from the father's family to the husband's family. This is a legal transfer of responsibility for guardianship of the property and privileges of this woman. When you have marriage with manus, this means that a woman is legally and religiously transferred from her father's household to her husband's household. This does mean that she gains some rights over and within the husband's household and responsibility for the management of that property and chattels and so forth. This means that she becomes part of that household's religious observances and so forth, their ancestral gods and household gods, and is essentially disconnected from her original family. Marriage without manus is much more common because it provides more liberty for the woman involved. It simply requires that she maintain herself outside of the home for 3 days out of the year. This means that she remains part of her father's family and has no rights or privileges or responsibilities with regard to her husband's family property or cult. And so there's a downside to this as well. If the husband's property is in question, a wife without manus has no connection to that. And so, even as a widow, is not in a position to help dispose of it or take care of it. The obverse of this is that she retains her own property under these circumstances. Marriage with manus means that her property is joined to the husband's property. But as a widow, she would have a connection to that property of her husband, which would not be the case in marriage without manus. Cornelia, the mother of the Gracchi, very famous Roman woman. The answer that is given to this particular question is, she didn't go to Egypt to marry Ptolemy. All these other things are true. Cornelia, the mother of the Gracchi, a very good woman to get to know. In terms of understanding what is expected of Roman matrons, because she was widely admired and revered, and she had these connections. She's connected to the family of the Scipios, and then her children become these leaders of the populist revolution, and are assassinated by the conservatives for their attempts to change things for the Roman masses. But most of all, because Cornelia, the mother of the Gracchi, always stands up for what is proper and right in terms of Roman virtue. She is a Roman matron, the prototypical Roman matron who is not submissive, is not quiet, who is assertive and vocal. In the pursuance of Roman cultural values, and that is what the Romans expect of their women. Sextus Tarquin. So Sextus Tarquin rapes Lucretia. The reason why is important. He rapes Lucretia because she is the most virtuous of the Roman matrons. She represents the highest principles, and is the best wife out of the nobility, and everybody knows this talk. And so he deliberately chooses her to besmirch as an exhibition of his own power, his own ability to be above cultural law, essentially, as a prince. And this is the turning point for the Romans, because it demonstrates that the monarchy is an un-Roman thing. That placing one person in charge of in a superior position over all the rest of the noble families leads to this kind of abuse of power, leads to this kind of corruption, and must be eliminated. And so the monarchy is abolished as a result of this. This is a legend, and so it's very possible that this didn't actually happen in this way. It's a legend, however, that is inherent to Roman culture, and that the Romans, every Roman knows the story of why the monarchy is abolished. The monarchy is abolished because Sextus Tarquin attacks Rome by attacking Roman virtue in the form of a woman who is representative of it, symbolic of it, manifests it. He attacks a Roman matron, the embodiment of Roman virtue. And this is a demonstration of the fact that monarchic power, the embodiment of power in a single man, was intolerable, because it breeds this contempt for the values and morals that all Romans believe in, that is embodied in the Roman matron, whose duty and responsibility is to embrace these values, and be a consistent embodiment of them, and transmit them to the next generation. In contrast to the men, whose business is to protect property and fight and bloody their hands. The women retain the cultural values and virtues of the Romans, so that it can be passed on uncorrupted by what the men have to do in order to make Rome survive. And so this is the key. This is why this thing ends the monarchy. This provides us into insight into how the Romans think about gender and power and virtue through the story of the rape of Lucretia. And that's the end of the quiz. Email me with any questions.